It is thankfully incredibly rare for a woman to be abducted from our streets. But I completely understand that despite that, women in London and the wider public will be worried and may be feeling scared.
It was a message designed to reassure. So why do so many women still feel so scared?
I was walking to my car one morning ready for my early shift, and a group of men further up the road from me called me a slut and told me to get back here. I got in my car, locked the door and drove off. I was absolutely petrified.
Packed tube, rush hour, a man was standing closely behind me. I thought he was so close because the tube was so busy, but then I could feel him breathing on my neck and I could feel him pressing himself against me, and I realised he knew what he was doing and I was petrified.
There's this narrative around sexual harassment and assault that what you're wearing matters. But when I was first catcalled at 10 years old, I was wearing my school uniform.
A new survey of 1,000 women in the UK found 97% of those aged 18 to 24 have been sexually harassed. 80% of women of all ages said they'd experienced sexual harassment in public spaces. Nearly half of women said they didn't think reporting the harassment would make any difference. And even for those women who do report sexual harassment or violence to police, only around 3% lead to someone being charged.
Because there is no specific legislation, it means that if victims were to report it, sadly the police will say, well, we're too busy with quote unquote more serious crimes. And as a result, there's no consequences. If there's no consequences, then men feel they can operate with impunity.
2 women are killed by a man every week in the UK.
Benita Knoll, Tracy Kidd.
Today in the Commons, it took MP Jess Phillips more than 4 minutes to read out the names of victims from the last year alone.
Maureen Kidd, Wendy Morse, Nagiba Alariki.
Well, earlier I spoke to Marian FitzGerald, a visiting professor of criminology at the University of Kent. Daniel Guiness, the director of a charity which runs workshops in schools to help boys contribute to improving gender relationships. The Labour MP Jess Phillips we've just seen, and Sophia Moreau, a 26-year-old women's rights campaigner from London. Marian FitzGerald, you tell us that the statistics tell us we shouldn't be worried or frightened, but women are worried and women are frightened.
I'm saying that we should be no more worried and no more frightened than usual because of this. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying there is no reason not to take precautions, but I think that one of the differences that maybe we're seeing now is that these events are so rare. If you think back to Millie Dowler, I mean, that was 2002. Now, for a lot of young women at the time, that was the first time they'd come across anything like this, but that was 18 years ago. So this is the first experience of a lot of young women who are for the first time encountering the sort of things that young women have always experienced and are being exposed to those. It's the first time they've had the reality of that fear at its extreme brought home to them.
But I suppose the problem is when you say we should be no more frightened or women should be no more frightened than usual, for many women, usual is pretty terrible. Sophia Moreau, can you tell me a little bit about what happened to you?
So when I was 16 years old, I was walking in broad daylight from my sixth form at the time, and I was followed home. I realised that I was being followed and went into a shop. I waited there for about 20 minutes because I didn't want him to see where I lived, just in case. I naively actually asked him, "Are you following me?" because I was in disbelief as to what was actually happening. And he denied following me, and I realised I just needed to get out of the situation, but I had, as many people do, the reaction of freezing. I didn't report it on that day because I knew that it would not have met the threshold, so I noted down his details while I still remembered them. Then 2 months later, or it was about a month and a half perhaps, after I'd changed address for unrelated reasons, I saw him outside my new address. And this is when I realised I do need to call the police now. Hopefully I will have met the threshold. Instead, when I did report it, I was talked out of taking it any further by the police officer.
You're 16 at that stage. Describe that level of fear and what that does to you subsequently.
The sad thing is I was feeling fear, but it was also familiarity. I'd been sexually harassed beforehand. I'd been street harassed beforehand. It was more a matter of how do I prevent this from becoming serious?
Jess Phillips, she felt fear, but she felt familiarity. And that sense of familiarity is what we have heard from women all over the country over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a massive outpouring of expressions of the risk assessment that women have to do every single day when they're doing anything, and we do it without even realising that it's happening. And I think, you know, it is important that the point that has been made about how we're no more in danger today than we were yesterday in light of this case. Which has been harrowing and has brought about feelings of real fear and upset. We are no more at danger as individuals, but we were already at risk.
Clearly, what many women are saying is that this is an issue about men. The focus is endlessly on women. How do women modify their behaviour? But many women saying this is an issue for men. And Daniel Guiness, you're the director of Beyond Equality. You work with boys and young men. What are you telling them? What are you hearing from them about this issue?
There's a lot of panic in a moment like this that we have at the moment, but there's a lot of disbelief and denial at many, many other times in the year. And we do say to young men and boys, you have a huge role to play in ending this, in actually creating a society that is safe and can be safe for everyone. And the reason why men have such a big role to play is the other side of the stats. When you look at who's perpetrating the violence, the vast majority of violent crime is perpetrated by men, the vast majority. And we as men have such an important part in denormalising, destabilising, challenging, disrupting any of those norms that say it's okay to resort to violence, it's okay to force yourself on somebody.
Jess Phillips?
Yeah, I just think that it's a really important thing to say that, you know, I don't want to pitch men versus women and say they're getting killed more than them. One thing I would say where men definitely win is the people who are perpetrating the violence against both men and women. What I don't want this time, in light of this case, in light of the outpouring of women talking about how they feel and what they want to go forward, what I don't want is it to become we're men versus women. This is about how we're asking men to join us because it is men's violence, and we've done everything we can. We've walked a different way. We've locked ourselves away. We've asked our mates to follow us on a phone. We've done it all, and it didn't keep us safe. So we're going to hand over to men and say, come along, what are we going to do to stop this? And I'm going to certainly be putting that at the government's door as well, because this is a system issue, not just a men versus women issue.
Sophia, where do you think the change lies? How do we change this now?
I would say that it definitely has to be a shared effort, because at the heart of it, these are social issues. They can escalate to crimes, but they are at the very beginning social issues, and it needs to be addressed at a behavioural level, as well as a process level, as well as in the terms of how authorities handle it.
And Jess Phillips, there is a huge question, isn't there, about how the criminal justice system is able or willing to deal with these crimes against women. And at the moment, on pretty much every measure, it's failing, isn't it?
It's totally failing, and it fails more and more year on year. And whether that's a resources issue or a risk issue, and they're saying that we don't deal with these things because of this resource, or there's a failure in evidence gather at the police end, at the Crown prosecution end, it doesn't really matter. 24% fall in rape convictions on this day compared to last year. 23% reduction in domestic violence convictions. What I'm afraid to say, and I make no bones about saying this actually, every year at the moment, for about the past decade, it has basically, we're slowly but surely legalising violence against women. We're letting people get away with it to the point that when nothing happened to that man who did that to Sophia, what message does that send? That sends the message that he can do that again, and he will, and maybe it'll escalate next time. The government have got to look at the data in all the failures and really insert themselves into it the way they insert themselves into terrorism, the way they insert themselves into knife crime.
Daniel Guiness, we have talked and touched on what women do themselves to try to mitigate risk on a day-to-day basis. I just wonder, what advice would you give to men right now that would help make women's lives less fearful day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see a tendency for men to try to jump into a protector role, and I think that's going to be a mistake, because it's all about, once again, about taking power and trying to control people. Instead, I would be encouraging men to listen. I'd be encouraging them to donate to the services that support survivors. I would be asking them to learn, do some reading, do some reflection on their own attitudes, the way they talk to their friends, the way they talk to their children, the way they've been taught by their parents. And when they see these moments, they're actually normalising this violence, normalising these attitudes that accept that violence, challenge it. You know, step up. That's when you can be brave. That's when you can get in there and challenge it.
Everyone is shaking their collective heads there. And Jess Phillips, you stand up in the Commons and you read out that utterly depressing list of women who've been killed by men. It took you 4 minutes today. I just wonder, how long do you think you'll end up having to do that for? And what does it make you feel like every time you have to do it?
Right, you never get used to it. You never, ever get used to... And I have worked in the field of violence against women and girls for decades, and I still have an incredibly thin skin about it, actually, and it hurts each and every time. But at the moment, I can see there isn't even a strategy to reduce the number of domestic homicides. That's not a strategy that exists. So we might, we'll have strategies in government for zero homelessness or zero knife crime. We don't even have the ambition to end domestic homicide. So as far as I know, the list will take me 4, 5, 6 minutes for the entire time I'll be elected, the way we're going at the moment.
On that depressing note, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us, all of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And if you've been affected by any of the issues raised, you can go to channel4.com/support for more information about where to seek help.